Chapter 1, Anatomy of a Diplomatic Disaster ****. Dr. Adrian Voss adjusted his collar for the fifth time, cursing the stiff uniform mandated for first contact missions. The synthetic fabric clung uncomfortably to his skin, but discomfort was the least of his worries. In less than a minute, he would meet a species that had never encountered humans before. The Xelari delegation was due aboard the U.E.S. Pathfinder at any moment. Their species, renowned for their genetic engineering prowess, had evolved past the need for natural reproduction, relying on controlled cloning and artificial gestation. Their physiological structure was still largely a mystery, but their intellectual superiority was undeniable. The upcoming diplomatic exchange had the potential to open trade, cooperation, and new frontiers for human expansion. If Adrian didn't screw it up. A deep chime reverberated through the docking bay. He swallowed, straightening as the airlock cycled open. A wave of pressurized mist hissed outward before the doors parted, revealing the Xelari delegation. They were taller than expected, their sleek, bioluminescent skin pulsing faintly beneath the sterile lighting. 6 glowing eyes adorned their elongated heads, scanning the surroundings with detached curiosity. Their movements were unnervingly smooth, as if gliding rather than walking. The lead figure, Zy'Nara, stepped forward. She was different. Unlike the others, whose expressions remained unreadable, Zy'Nara tilted her head at Adrian, as though analyzing him in real time. Her violet skin shimmered as she extended a 3-fingered hand. Human. Her voice was a blend of harmonic tones, neither harsh nor soft. I am Zy'Nara, Xelari Science Cast, designated to observe and understand your species. Adrian exhaled and accepted her hand. Her skin was cool and oddly textured, like polished glass. Dr. Adrian Voss, xenobiologist. Welcome to the Pathfinder. Zy'Nara's fingers lingered a second longer than expected before she released him. I look forward to this knowledge exchange. Behind her, a towering figure remained rigid, his 6 golden eyes locked onto Adrian with unsettling intensity. Commodore Helix Zari. Unlike Zy'Nara's neutral curiosity, his gaze was calculating. Adrian forced a diplomatic smile. Shall we proceed to the observation deck? The Xelari followed in eerie silence, save for Zy'Nara, who maintained a steady pace beside him. I have studied your species extensively, she said. Though our databanks are limited. Adrian glanced at her. What interests you the most? Your biology is inefficient. Her 6 eyes blinked in sequence. Your reliance on chaotic reproduction is fascinating. Your species still engages in biological procreation, correct? Adrian coughed. Yes. That's still a thing we do. Curious. Zy'Nara's fingers twitched, a motion Adrian guessed was a habitual tic. You experience physiological changes based on attraction, correct? He nodded cautiously. That's one way to put it. Her pupils constricted. Demonstrate. Adrian blinked. What? Zy'Nara reached out before he could react, pressing 2 cool fingers against the inside of his wrist. A sharp intake of breath escaped him as her touch sent a small, involuntary jolt through his system. His heartbeat spiked. Then, before he could even process what was happening, her fingers drifted downward, grazing the top of his thigh. Adrian nearly jumped out of his skin. Human, she said with analytical detachment, tilting her head, why does your breeding tool grow when I touch it? A noise escaped Adrian that he wasn't sure was human. He stumbled back, heat rushing to his face. That's not, you can't just. Zy'Nara's expression remained neutral. Did I initiate a physiological reaction? Yes, but... Fascinating. Her fingers twitched again. I had read about involuntary responses in human males but required direct confirmation. Adrian squeezed his eyes shut. He was going to die. Right here, in the middle of a diplomatic mission, of sheer, unrelenting embarrassment. A low, disapproving voice interrupted. Ambassador Zy'Nara. The room seemed to drop in temperature. Commodore Zari loomed over them, his golden eyes flashing in irritation. This is not an appropriate line of inquiry. Zy'Nara didn't flinch. It is a scientific observation. Dr. Voss did not indicate refusal. Adrian wheezed. What? I didn't exactly. Zari's gaze turned to Adrian, sharp as a blade. Are all humans so undisciplined in their biological urges? Adrian clenched his jaw. That was an involuntary reaction, not a lack of discipline. Convenient rationalization. Zari's lip curled. I see now why your species is prone to conflict. You are ruled by impulse. Zy'Nara's eyes flickered. Emotional responses are not inherently negative. They are a liability, Zari countered. This mission is meant for logical exchange, not primitive indulgence. Adrian exhaled sharply, willing his composure back. Look, this is a misunderstanding. Human biology is complex, but that doesn't mean we lack control. Zari's gaze lingered, unreadable. We shall see. Zy'Nara, seemingly unfazed, turned back to Adrian. I have many more inquiries regarding human biology. Adrian held up a hand. Maybe let's stick to cultural topics for now. She inclined her head. Acceptable. Zari remained silent, but the air around him carried an unmistakable tension. The moment had not gone unnoticed. Adrian exhaled slowly as they resumed walking. He could already tell. This mission was going to be a nightmare. Chapter 2, Cultural Misfire ****. The conference chamber aboard the U.E.S. Pathfinder had been carefully prepared for diplomacy. A long, polished table stretched through the center, surrounded by floating holodisplays showcasing trade routes, technological blueprints, and cultural data. A subtle blue glow from the overhead panels cast a sterile light over the participants. Dr. Adrian Voss adjusted his seat, trying to focus. Across from him, Zy'Nara sat with her unnerving stillness, hands folded neatly on the table. Commodore Zari stood behind her, arms clasped behind his back, his golden eyes scanning the room with quiet disapproval. The human delegation, led by Captain Ramirez, had taken their places as well. This was humanity's chance to forge an alliance with the Xelari. If Adrian could prevent any more biological incidents, they might just pull it off. Captain Ramirez initiated the discussion, her voice calm yet commanding. The Terran Coalition is open to knowledge exchange, technological cooperation, and diplomatic relations. We understand the Xelari have strong genetic sciences, and we are interested in a mutually beneficial partnership. Zy'Nara's bioluminescent skin pulsed slightly. We are willing to provide controlled access to genetic advancements. However, our species does not engage in unrestricted trade. Every exchange must serve a purpose. Zari inclined his head. And our purpose is order. Chaos is a threat to all. Ramirez's expression didn't change. Humanity thrives in adaptability. We learn, we grow, we improve. That's not chaos, it's progress. Adrian tensed. He could already see the ideological divide forming. Zy'Nara's 6 eyes studied the humans with interest, but Zari's stance remained rigid. I have reviewed your historical records, Zy'Nara said. Wars, political upheaval, emotional governance. Your species navigates existence through conflict. Adrian cleared his throat. Conflict is a catalyst for growth. Through struggle, we innovate. We don't seek destruction, but we do evolve through challenge. Zy'Nara tilted her head. You perceive adversity as a necessity? Not a necessity, Adrian said, choosing his words carefully. But often an unavoidable reality. We overcome obstacles. That's how we survive. Zari's lips curled in distaste. I fail to see the appeal of a species bound to such primitive mechanisms. Ramirez leaned forward. Our history isn't perfect, but our resilience is why we're still here. We don't erase flaws, we learn from them. Zy'Nara tapped her fingers against the table, her expression unreadable. Fascinating. Adrian relaxed slightly. Maybe, just maybe, they were making progress. Hashtag a subtle sabotage. The discussions continued, covering scientific advancements, resource exchanges, and potential diplomatic frameworks. Zy'Nara remained inquisitive, her questions bordering on philosophical. Zari, however, scrutinized every word, as if cataloging weaknesses. Then the shift happened. Zari's tone became sharper, his questions more pointed. Humans rely on emotional bonds to establish loyalty. Is this not a dangerous evolutionary flaw? Adrian frowned. I wouldn't call it a flaw. Emotions strengthen cooperation. They foster trust, unity. Zari's golden eyes narrowed. Or manipulation. Zy'Nara's gaze flickered between them. Elaborate. Zari gestured subtly toward Adrian. Humans bond through subconscious physiological responses. They form attachments that cloud judgment. Emotional sway leads to irrational decision-making. Adrian clenched his jaw. You think emotions make us weak? I think emotions make you volatile, Zari said smoothly. Your species is ruled by unpredictable impulses. Your history proves this. Zy'Nara remained silent, processing the exchange. Adrian leaned forward. You're oversimplifying. We don't deny logic, we integrate it. Emotions aren't a liability. They drive ambition, inspire innovation. They connect us. Zari's expression remained unreadable. And yet, your history is one of war. Ramirez spoke before Adrian could. War is not exclusive to humanity. Every advanced species has faced internal struggles. What matters is how we move forward. Zari's lips curled slightly. And yet, even now, your kind struggles with restraint. The words were subtle, but the implication was sharp. Adrian exhaled slowly. Are you implying something, Commodore? Zari's gaze didn't waver. I merely observe. The air in the room grew heavier. Zy'Nara's bioluminescence dimmed slightly, her fingers interlacing. She was thinking. Calculating. Adrian's gut told him something was off. Zari wasn't just debating, he was planting seeds. He was shaping the perception of humanity, subtly guiding Zy'Nara toward doubt. Hashtag an experiment in emotion. As the meeting adjourned, Zy'Nara approached Adrian, her expression neutral. Dr. Voss, I have additional inquiries. Adrian hesitated. Of course. She studied him for a long moment. Your emotions, are they controllable? He frowned. To a degree. We regulate them, but they are intrinsic to who we are. She nodded as if confirming something. I wish to conduct a test. Adrian's stomach tightened. What kind of test? Zy'Nara raised a delicate brow. A controlled emotional trigger. Before he could respond, she reached out, her cool fingers pressing against his temple. A tingling sensation crawled through his skull as his pulse quickened. Then she whispered. I need you to feel fear. A jolt of panic surged through him, sharp and immediate. His breath hitched, his muscles locked. The room blurred slightly, a strange tightness gripping his chest. The primal response was overwhelming, instinctual. Then it vanished. Zy'Nara withdrew her hand, her 6 eyes studying his reaction. Fascinating. Adrian exhaled, still shaken. What the hell was that? A neural stimulus, she said. A direct trigger to evoke an emotional state. Adrian rubbed his temples. You induced fear? Yes, she said matter-of-factly. To study its effect. Adrian's mind reeled. And what did you learn? Zy'Nara's bioluminescence pulsed faintly. That fear sharpens your cognition. It heightens awareness, forces adaptation. Unlike my kind, who relies solely on calculated responses, you react in real time. Adrian let out a slow breath. And? Zy'Nara tilted her head. I am beginning to understand why your species survives. She turned to leave but paused. I believe the Commodore seeks to discredit you. Adrian's pulse steadied. I suspected as much. Zy'Nara's gaze lingered. He fears what he does not understand. Adrian nodded. And what about you? Her lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. I am still deciding. As she left, Adrian remained standing, his heartbeat still unsteady. The Xelari weren't just here to observe. They were testing humanity. And Zari was stacking the deck against them. Chapter 3, The Unraveling Asterisk. Dr. Adrian Voss sat in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the polished metal surface of his desk. His fingers drummed against the cold material, his mind still processing the last few hours. Zy'Nara's experiment had shaken him more than he cared to admit. It wasn't just the fear she had induced, it was the implications behind it. She hadn't done it out of cruelty or malice. She had done it to understand. Zari, however, was another matter entirely. The Commodore's subtle jabs, his carefully placed rhetoric, it wasn't just skepticism. It was sabotage. A chime at his door snapped him out of his thoughts. Come in. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Zy'Nara stepped inside, her violet skin illuminated by the ambient lighting. Her movements were graceful, deliberate. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Here to run another experiment? Her 6 eyes blinked in sequence. No. I am here to warn you. That got his attention. He straightened. About Zari? She inclined her head. He sees your species as a threat. Adrian scoffed. Figures. Zy'Nara's expression remained unreadable. His position holds weight. If he convinces the High Council that humanity is volatile, it will jeopardize any chance of alliance. Adrian exhaled sharply. And let me guess, he's been preparing his argument this entire time. She nodded. He has collected data from our interactions. He will present it as evidence. Adrian frowned. Evidence of what? That humans are incapable of control. That emotion overrides logic, leading to destruction. Adrian rubbed his temples. So what do I do? Sit back while he dismantles everything we've worked toward. Zy'Nara studied him. No. You prove him wrong. He let out a dry laugh. Oh, that's all? Just prove that an entire species isn't dangerous based on one conversation? She tilted her head. Not just one conversation. A final test. His stomach clenched. What kind of test? Zy'Nara hesitated. For the first time, he saw something resembling uncertainty in her posture. Zari has proposed a controlled scenario, she said carefully. A demonstration of restraint. Adrian narrowed his eyes. Meaning? He wants to provoke you. Adrian leaned forward. And what happens if I don't react? Then you prove him wrong. Adrian exhaled slowly. And if I fail? Her bioluminescence dimmed. The alliance will collapse. #the trial of control. The meeting chamber was eerily silent. Zy'Nara stood beside Zari, while Adrian took his place across from them. Captain Ramirez and the rest of the human delegation watched from the sidelines, their expressions unreadable. Zari stepped forward, his golden eyes gleaming. Dr. Voss, do you understand the purpose of this exercise? Adrian forced his voice to remain steady. You want to see if I can remain rational under pressure. Zari's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Precisely. Adrian braced himself. Then the test began. Zari's tone was calm, his words precise. He started small, references to humanity's wars, the cycles of violence in their history. He spoke of destruction, of species wiped out due to human expansion. His voice carried no accusation, only observation. Adrian kept his breathing even. He had expected this. But then, Zari changed tactics. I have reviewed the personal records of your family, the Commodore said smoothly. Your lineage is not free from this unpredictability. Adrian's jaw tightened. Your father served in the Colonial Defense Corps, did he not? Zari continued. A man who, by all accounts, was loyal. Yet records show he was discharged for insubordination. Adrian forced his expression to remain neutral. He stood up to a superior officer for ordering an unjust attack. Zari inclined his head. An emotional response. Adrian's fingers curled slightly. He unclenched them. Zari pressed on. Your history is riddled with defiance. Your actions in this mission confirm it. You react. You do not calculate. You are ruled by impulse, by unchecked emotion. Adrian's pulse pounded in his ears, but he didn't move. Then Zari took a step closer. Even now, I see it. The tension in your muscles. The fire behind your eyes. You want to strike me. Adrian exhaled slowly. No. I don't. Zari's voice dipped lower. Lies. Adrian didn't speak. The silence stretched. Then Zy'Nara stepped forward. The test is complete, she announced. Zari's gaze snapped to her. He is not broken. That does not mean he is controlled. Zy'Nara met his stare evenly. He has remained composed under provocation. That is control. Zari's eyes flickered. You defend him? I acknowledge facts. Adrian kept his breath steady. He had done it. Zari stepped back, his expression unreadable. We shall see what the High Council decides. #resolution. The meeting ended, but the tension lingered. As the delegates dispersed, Zy'Nara lingered behind. You did well, she said quietly. Adrian let out a slow breath. I almost lost it. But you didn't. He met her gaze. What happens now? She considered for a moment. I will speak on your behalf. The decision is not mine alone, but your actions today will carry weight. Adrian studied her. And what do you believe? Her expression softened, just barely. That your species is flawed. Adrian huffed a small laugh. Thanks. But, she continued, you are also fascinating. He raised an eyebrow. Fascinating good or fascinating bad? Her lips curved slightly. That is what I intend to discover. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Adrian standing in the empty chamber. Maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance after all.